right, good morning, everyone. We're starting the day by giving charity. Here we go. Charity will bring the geula. Tzion b'mishpat tapara v'shaveh v'tzedakah. Hashem, protect all of our soldiers, defeat all of our enemies, transform the world to a place that's good. We need Moshiach now. And here we go. Yesterday we learned about Bilam, how God transformed the curses of Bilam to blessings. And we said, why is it? Because every Jew has inside of him, has within his soul, a portion of God. So God hating the Jews is like hating himself. So he can't do this. This doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, but it's true. And the mind continues on, and we're not going to continue. We'll just go over it. That's what's called the chachma of the soul. That's the yud of the Jewish soul. The yud is God's name. Yud, and then hey, and then vav, and then hey, and that's the letter yud. And the Rebbe goes on to explain the different letters of God that are found in the soul, how they are found in the soul. We'll see, maybe we'll go back to that. But suffice it to say that the Rebbe explained why it is that Bilam, who was the ultimate in anti-Semitism, could not curse the Jews, and even more, the curse turned into a blessing. Because the only reason that the Jews are the target of all of this hatred is because they're the representatives of God, and God is good. God is life. God is existence, creation, the creator. He's not the destroyer. So people don't like that. People don't like good, and they don't like creation. They don't like this. So when someone tries to destroy the Jews and God protects them, so automatically is, when the bad is done away with, automatically there is good. There's just the creation. There's the creator is just revealed. And that's the Jewish people are the representatives of the creator. That's why they're called the chosen people. It says it several times in the Bible. It's not a new thing. I didn't make it up. The Bavitcher Rebbe didn't make it up. God made it up. There it is in the Torah. And what does it mean that we're the sons of God and we're the chosen of God, and etc.? That's what it means. It means that the Jewish people have this inner point of pure creator in themselves that cannot possibly be destroyed, but it attracts destroyers. And because of that, it transforms the energy that God, and the people who are like to destroy are also being created by God. So it transforms the whole thing to good. And that's what he explained over there. Let's do, there's another topic. Let's do another topic here. Interesting thing. Right in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, it says a strange law that when a person has two wives, if a person has two wives, and one of them he loves and the other one he hates. Now the law is that the firstborn child, the firstborn gets a double portion. That's how it is in Judaism. Double. What does it mean a double portion? If the father passes away, and let's say he has 6 children, one of them is the firstborn. So he has $6 million, and he wants to give it out. How does he do it? So it says, excuse me, you divide the whole business to 7 portions. 7. And the oldest son gets 2. He gets 2. And the others, they get a regular portion. So he gets a double portion. Right? That's how it goes. So he gets a double portion. And then the other 5 sons, they all get their whatever they get. Right? So you divide the amount into, instead of dividing it up into 5, or how many sons did I say? He has 6 sons, right? So if he has $6 million, so you divide $6 million into 7 portions. And the older one gets a double one. When the father passes away, he gets a double portion. That's the way it goes. Okay, what if the older son comes from the wife that he hates, doesn't like her? Doesn't like, there's the old. So the law doesn't make any difference. You have to give him the double portion, even, okay, so that's a pretty strange law. I mean, what are you putting a thing like that in the Torah for? It's a bizarre, rare case. How many people have 2 wives, and how many people have one of the wives he loves and one of these he hates? You know, it's an unusual case. You have to write that in the Torah. So the Rebbe said, not only is it not an unusual case, it's the most common case you can possibly find, perhaps in the Torah. Perhaps in the Torah. Only really relevant to the Jewish people, but from them comes to all mankind. How is it relevant to everybody? How so? So we'll see. What's a commandment to hate one wife or something? What does it mean? You got to take two wives? You don't have to take two wives. What if they don't have any children? And what if you... Okay, so let's see. Lahav, to understand, Mamar, it says Vahaya. And the oldest son, Haya, and it was, and Vahaya means it will be. It is. What does it mean, Vahaya? Hu al pi mashkatu. This is what is written by Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital, he wrote down what the Arizal said. Arizal was Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. Rabbi Chaim Vital was an amazingly holy person. He was the pupil of the Arizal. The Arizal is called, anyway, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, that's his name. And he wrote, he lived about 400 years ago, and he wrote most of the basis of modern day Kabbalah, all comes from the Arizal. The Arizal. So his pupil was Rabbi Chaim Vital. He wrote down his main pupil. He had a lot of pupils. Okay, so there's what's called the 8 gates. There's 8 books that he wrote, and one of them is called the Shara Kedusha, the Gate of Holiness. And what does it say over there? Let me make this bigger. Let me make this bigger. Here we go. Bigger, bigger. Oh, there we go. Sheyesh, that there is Sheyesh, that there is the Kol Echad Ve'echad Me'Yisrael. Every single Jew has Shtei Nefashos. It's got 2 souls. What does it mean, 2 souls? What is a soul? A soul is me. It's me. My soul. That's me. Who is me? Me is not my body. My soul is in my body. It's united with my body. Therefore, where my body goes, it automatically takes my soul with it. But the real me, my consciousness, my emotions, my intellect, my ideas, what I like, what I don't like, my personality, my character, my talents, that's my soul. That's me. That's what's inside of me. I mean, a comforting idea is that a soul never dies, right? A person might die, but his soul never dies. It's just the connection between the soul and the body goes away. Okay, it's not as simple as that, but let's say it is as simple as that. The soul never dies. It's always, okay. So a Jew has 2 souls. He's got 2 identities. 2 identities. What does it mean, 2 identities? One of them is natural, like everybody else, basically like everybody else. I want to eat, I want to sleep, I wake up, my bank account, my house, my children, my things that I get emotional about, right? If I win the lottery, I'm excited. If my next door neighbor wins the lottery, I'm not so excited. Why not? Because that's me, right? So that a person, one soul is yourself. Here I am. I exist. It's obvious, most obvious thing in the world, right? How did Descartes say the famous saying, I am conscious, therefore I exist? That's the basis of all certainty that he had. Cogito ergo sum. If I'm aware, then I exist. That's I'm sure that I exist. By a Jew, there's another soul that's even more certain. It's a certainty, automatic, instant certainty that God exists. Just like I know that I exist, you can talk to me all day and convince me I don't exist. I'll say afterwards, you're nuts. I know that I exist. Who you're trying to convince? I know I exist. Right? I'm sure that I exist. Well, in a Jew, there's another soul, and it's even more certain, and that's called the godly soul, and it's certain that God exists. And if you think about it for a second, that's more certain because a person lives and he dies and he changes things, but God creates us. So God is more real than we are. Our whole existence comes from God. We're being created every instant by God. The world is a big miracle. It's God's world. He's creating the whole thing all the time. but we don't feel it. Why don't we feel it? Because we have two souls. One soul is what's called the natural soul that feels, if God exists, but he's separate from me. And there's a good chance that if God exists, it is me. I'm God. Right? That's a big portion of the world. That's for the atheists. Generally, think, right? I always say that there's no such thing as an atheist. There's I-theist. I-theist. The big capital I. I'm God. I believe myself. That's what's called the natural soul. That's what's called nefesh hachayonis. This is what's called the enlivening soul. Habahamis, the animal soul. Why is it called an animal soul? Because compared to the godly soul, it's like an animal. We'll see. This is the natural human soul of a person, which is put in the blood of a person, lachayota guf, to enliven the body. This comes from a very high place. It's a spiritual soul. A soul is spiritual. That's the natural soul. It comes by means of many, many levels and how do you say the process, a whole big process. Derech Sarim, there's all these angels and mazolos, and there's the planets and the sky and the zodiac. Like it says, in Lecha Esav, there is no plant below that hasn't got some sort of a mazel. A mazel is a spiritual power from above, and shemaka that hits it, Omer Gadol. Says mazel is a spiritual power. It's called mazel from the word nozel. It drips because godliness is too real. We can't take it. So it drips down to us little, how do you say, the watered down amounts of life and luck and health, etc., that we can get. That's called mazel. There's no mazel from above, and it comes through the stars, and that's why the stars are also called mazalot. Okay, so everything in the world has some sort of a spiritual power that tells it to grow. And that spiritual power is a spiritual power above it. And that one has above it. And the one above it. Because higher and higher, the godliness and spirituality is higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. Godliness. All of that is part of the creation. That's part of what's called the animal soul. The angels are called animals. Because it gets far away from the light of God. In this, what's called the chaining down of levels from level to level, the ilale Allah from cause to effect, bahastirim, betzimtzumim, and all sorts of concealments and contractions, rabim, until shenishtalshel begufa adam, until it comes to the body of a person, basar adam, a human Jew, velochen, therefore he kalula mitov arad is included from good and bad. That's what's called in the Bible the tree of knowledge of good and bad. That's what's called the natural soul compared to the godly soul, which we'll learn about in a second. It's called the animal soul or the enlivening soul, which is basically the human soul. Human soul. It has a conscience. It has a feeling of spirituality, a feeling of religiousness. It cares about what's going to happen to me after I die, what's going to happen to me after I was born, what's going to be tomorrow, that's a natural soul. Natural soul. That's the nature. That's why God created it. Umimenu boas, from a person comes also midos raos. Now in the Tanya, the book of the Tanya, which is the basic book of Chabad, it begins right in the beginning by a totally, unique and they say the revolutionary idea of what is good and bad. What is good and bad? Up to now, we figured what's good and bad is doing what God said is good and not doing what he said is bad. That's good. That's right. A religious idea. What is good? Good is doing what God wants. Bad is doing what God forbids. Right? Not listening to God. That's bad. Which that's true. But the Tanya explains it in a whole new dimension. Good is living only for the Creator. Right? Of course, doing, thinking with it, but also why you do it. Love. Having love. Feeling the Creator. That's feeling the Creator. That's good. What is bad? Feeling yourself. You do anything for yourself. You do the Torah, you do the commandments, you're doing all that, you're a religious person, but you're thinking I'm doing it to go to heaven. According to the Torah, Tanya, that's called bad. You won't get punished. There's no punishment for this type of bad. You don't go to hell. Right? It could be that you'll go to the highest levels of heaven, but still it's called bad. Why is it called bad? Because you did it for the wrong reason. Well, no, I mean, if it doesn't make any difference what I'm going to get, so what difference does it make? Right? So the answer is that's the whole point. That's called bad. If you're thinking about what I get, that's what determines, that's called bad. New definition of bad. You're not doing it for any reward and you're not afraid of any punishment. Now, you're doing only for God. God doesn't want me to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not interested in the punishment. I'm not interested in anything. God wants me to do it. I'm going to do it, even if I get punished. Here, take the example. Abraham took his son to kill him. His son was 37 years old at that time, right? To kill him. If he would have killed his son, who knows? He could have gotten punished. There was the 7 Noahide commandments that said you're not allowed to kill people. Right? Even if God tells you to kill people, there was a place to say, okay, God told you, but there's the 7 Noahide commandments. You're not allowed to kill people. Abraham didn't care about that. He knew what God wanted. He's going to do it. Even if he loses everything, Yitzchak he was going to lose for sure. He was going to lose his whole future. He was going to lose his whole past. He could have been he was going to go to hell. Who knows? Can't kill people. He didn't care about any of that. He only said one thing, I want to do what God wants. That's what's called the godly soul. That's what's called the godly soul. We'll see. So it says the natural soul, from it comes to a person, midot ra'ot, comes selfish emotions. Misodas Arayim, from what's called the 4 elements, 4 selfish elements. In the first chapter of the Tanya, it explains, right? The lust for things comes from water and loose-headedness and how do you say, lightheadedness and scoffing and things comes from air, and anger and the hatred comes from fire, and laziness comes from earth. Look in the first chapter of the Tanya. Tanya is a very interesting book. There's a lot of very excellent explanations online. You can look and see. V'gam also seichel enoshi, human intelligence. Human intelligence. Right? That's what's called from the natural soul. So on one hand, you can say, okay, listen, it's not so bad. I mean, people have conscience, and you can live for your conscience, right? Non-religious people, atheists, how do they get along in life? They have a conscience, and they live according to their conscience, and they're people that are very wonderful people, right? And they don't believe in God. They don't believe in any official religion or anything like that. They just follow their conscience. I mean, I'm saying this. I don't really know if this is true, but I'm saying that it could be that you're a totally good person without believing in God some way. But okay, let's say you can, right? So you're a good person, you don't steal, you don't lie, because your conscience tells you, your conscience is also connected to the truth, right? It's connected to the truth. A lot of non-religious people, they don't kill, and they don't steal, and they don't lust, and they don't lie, and they don't cheat. There's people like that. On the other hand, there's a lot of religious people that, God forbid, they do those things, right? Because the natural soul has good in it, right? Has good in it. And the godly soul, a person can fool himself. He can fool himself. He can do what's bad and make excuses. That's all coming from the natural soul. You do what you want. There's a constant battle. Because in Nefesh Kalula, because every soul is included from Chachma, Bina, and Dat, all the 10 aspects of godliness, as a person can be over Ratzono, go against what God wants. Like it says, Nefesh ki techata, the soul can bring you to do sins. This is called the natural soul, ki machmas ribo yestarim, because there's so much concealment that tzimtzumim and contractions and removal of God's light and etc. Hamachasim, which cover over the light of God, is nira la'adam. It seems to a person shehu yesh v'davar b'fnei. So therefore, because God made the world in such a way that God wants to be concealed, and God also put inside of us a soul which enjoys this concealment and can adapt to it very, very well, the concealment. So it seems to a person that he's totally separate from God, or even more, that God doesn't exist. All I feel is myself. But nefesh, that's the first soul. That's the natural soul. That's the world. That's nature. Nefesh Hasheni is by the Jewish people, which is Israel. That's called the godly soul. This is a chilek elokam mimal. This is a portion of God from above. That's what it means when it says the Jews are the sons of God. This is a part of God. We learned that yesterday. That's why Bilam could not curse the Jews, because every Jew has inside of him this little spark, and this little spark of godliness. This comes to a person, this comes straight. Like it says, Elokim asat adam yashar. This does not come through any natural spiritual processes. This comes direct from God. Like it says, Ata nafachtabi. Like it says, we say in the morning, the soul that you gave me is pure, and you created it, and you formed it, and you blew it into me. Ata, you, God, directly blew it into me. Like it says by Adam, first man. And the first man was supposed to be a Jew. I mean, he was a Jew until he started eating from the tree. The Yipach ba'apav nishmas chaim, that he blew into his soul, into his nostrils, a living soul. It explains in the Tanya that the whole world is created from God's speech. And speech is a very complicated thing, speech. Very complicated. How it comes up in your mind, you have to say what you think and how you articulate it, and there's your tongue and your palate and this, till you finally comes out and you have to put the words and the letters together, and it's very, very complicated. But that's how the world is made. God created the world. The Jewish soul, it says, comes from God's breath. The breath is the source of speech. If you haven't got your breath, if somebody knocks the wind out of you, you can't speak, right? Breath is very uncomplicated. Comes out, there's no process, there's nothing, that's it, you just blow it. It says that's direct, the breath is directly attached to you, to your heart, if you want. Which is not the case. Speaking has to come, it starts in your heart, your wind, you have a motivation to speak, but then it goes through your mind and a whole process is this. So the world is very complicated, but the Jewish soul is not complicated. It comes directly from God, and it's there constantly. It says later on, that speaking, a person can speak, you can record a speech. You can record a person's speech, or a person can speak behind a wall, and you hear the person perfectly. Or you can hear a person, if he yells, you hear him person. You don't see the person. There he is, it's his voice, his master's voice. I remember they used to, was it Victor, what is it, the record, something like that. The records, he had a dog listening to the radio. This is his master's voice. He hears his master's voice. It's his master. The same thing with speech can be separated from the person who's speaking, but breath cannot be. As soon as you put something between you and the thing that you're blowing on, then the wind stops. The same thing is with God's breath. It's constantly inside of every Jew, constant, just like Hevel Ha'adam, like the wind of a person that comes out from him, and nevertheless it is totally united with him without any division whatsoever. There's nothing which is separate from speech, from breath. It's the same thing with God. Nothing is outside of God. Everything else in the world is created through God's speech. So you can't see God's oneness. You can't detect it in the world, and anything in the world, even in your natural soul. It's a spiritual soul. You can feel spiritual. That's where all the religions come from, spirit. But the Jews and the Judaism, it comes from the godly soul, which that's pure God. It's not a speech of God. It's God's breath. It doesn't create spirit. It creates everything. It's not spiritual. It's essence, the creator. Like it's explained in the Tanya, Lochin, and this is the Jewish soul. Lochin, therefore, Tamid, Him, therefore, it's constantly united, B'matzilah, in the emanator, in the ultimate unity. Okay, so every Jew has two souls. And one soul is a natural soul, and the other soul is a godly soul. And the natural soul is, so to speak, part of the creation, and the godly soul is part of the creator. And the natural soul is very complicated, and it seems to be very distant from God, if God exists at all. And the godly soul is united all constantly with God, and it's obvious to the godly soul that there is nothing except for the creator. Okay, from this godly soul, mitzida lo efsharut, it's impossible for a person to sin at all. V'lios over ritzono, and to transgress God's will. Acharei, since shu miyuchedes, it's constantly united with God. B'matzila, with the emanator, zulat shanefesh bahamid malabish, but the problem is the godly soul, it can't be separated from God. The problem is that the natural soul covers it. It covers it. It closes it. Mechasem malim, it covers and conceals from seeing the light of God, like it says in Likuti Torah. Okay, so what do we say? A person has two identities. A Jew. Jews have two identities. One identity is a normal human identity, and a normal human being does not cut off his hand. Huh? A normal human being does not cut off his hand. Obvious thing, doesn't cut off a limb. Who cuts off? Why don't we cut off a limb? Why not? Because it's me. Why would I want to cut off part of myself? I feel me. Well, the godly soul feels the real me is the creator. And therefore, it cannot cut itself off from the creator. It cannot sunder this connection in any way. That's the godly soul. It automatically feels God. So a person might think, well, if so, then we don't have any choice in the world. I mean, obviously, that's not so. It's like, again, a pianist, right? A pianist. A person who's a pianist, I've got an excellent pianist, or somebody's in sports or whatever. So automatically, he feels the music. So you say, well, then he hasn't got any free will. I mean, he can't take like a blowtorch and, burn the piano down. Why would he do a thing like that? That's insane. That'll wreck up the music. But a person that doesn't know anything about music, it could be that he'll take a blowtorch and, what's this thing? What's all these strings? Let's see how it burns. So the natural soul doesn't feel any connection to God. He feels only connected to himself. So therefore, disconnecting from God is no big deal. To do sins, what's the problem? You don't even know what God is. But the godly soul feels the reality is really the creator. And to disconnect from the creator is disconnecting from reality. You can't do that. It says that's the two souls. That's what it says in the beginning of when God made man. It says he made it, but salmenu kidmotenu, in our image and in our form. Shenefesh elokit, the godly soul, this is what's called in our image. The chayonit, and the natural soul, is called in our form. Okay, why does God do this whole business? Why does he put the godly soul into the world at all? This is going to be the whole reason why God even made man in the first place. Putting the godly soul into the world was in order, litlabesh, to be clothed, to go into the animal soul, the natural soul, vilachem, and to war with it, ulavora, and to refine it, lahafrida tov minara, to take out the good from the bad, v'laloto, to elevate it to God, lahafcha chashucha lenora, to transform darkness to light. Isn't that the most natural thing in the world? I mean, if you think about it, people are born ignorant. That song they had, "Teachers Leave the Kids Alone," is a very evil song. Very evil, very evil song. People have to be educated. Good, the teachers have to be proper teachers, but that doesn't mean you throw out the baby with the bath. So there has to be education. People are born ignorant. They're born wild. They're born egotistical. And the teaching, you're supposed to teach them. Nobody's naturally born a doctor or a lawyer or a physicist or whatever, right? You have to learn. Everybody has to be, even people that don't go to university. Nowadays, there's no purpose to go to university anyway. I mean, that you can learn everything online. I guess you have to get a diploma. So you have to just, but even a person that goes into business, so he learns from his experiences. You have to learn. So it's the same thing with the world. The world is here to be educated. God created the world to educate it. To educate it? What? That there's a creator. And the creator has laws. And the creator has a reason for the creation. And if you want the world to be perfected, you have to perfect the world. Like I said, like a piano player, right? You have a piano, what's it got to do with anything? Right? You hear music, also nice. You want to make music? Right? If you want music is beautiful. You have music in the world. That you have to train yourself. You get a teacher, you teach yourself how to really appreciate music. The same thing is with the world. The world is here, it's like a big piano, and you have to have a teacher. The teacher is the godly soul, the natural soul that's part of the world, and you come to educate the world, to show the world that God does exist, that there is a creator, and that serving the creator is beautiful. It's harmonious. And therefore, the Jewish people are called Yisrael. They have to fight, right? You have to fight with yourself. Let's just keep using the example, like the piano player. He has to fight, he has to practice and keep practicing to, move his fingers like they're supposed to, and that they shouldn't move like they're not supposed to. That's the whole idea of the Jewish people. They're here in order to make the world a beautiful and a harmonious place. But in order to do that, it requires a battle. And that's why the Jewish people are called Yisrael. Like it's Sarita, Im Elokim ve'anashim v'tochal. God, after Jacob fought with the angel, so he said he fought the whole night with the angel, and the angel couldn't defeat him. And then God changed his name. He says, you have struggled with gods, that's the angel, and with people, and you defeated them. What does it mean? That's the purpose of the godly soul. The purpose of the godly soul is tistarer, that should rule over the natural soul, the animal soul, and to transform all of your thoughts and your emotions that are not to God from bad, from being selfish, tov, to being godly. Right? Like the pianist, he transforms everything from disharmony to harmony. The hamidos, the emotions, they're called Elokim. They're also called gods, like the angel that he fought with. Yavo b'nei Elokim, come the Elohim, the sons of gods. V'targumu b'nei Ravrase, the sons, those who make war, arguments. So therefore, Yaakov came into the world to fight against the natural inclinations that there are for every human being, with himself beginning himself. So it says he fought with the angel of Esav. So it says he fought with, what does it say? You fought with gods and with men. The Sarisa, you fought with gods and with men. It says gods, that's what's called your your animal soul. That's God's. It's a spiritual soul. So that's what it is. God's. That's called your emotions, your natural emotions, and that's it says Vo Elokim Im Anashim. And you also fought with men. What is it? You fought with men? That's called Maisa, your thoughts, speech, and action. Yaakov fought with angels and with men. Angels are talking about the natural soul, and men is talking about your body, what you do. And to transform them from being selfish to being good. By means of the godly soul, which is united with the emanator, Beli Esther Panim Klo, without any concealment at all. Hamavara Umala et Nefesh Achayonis. Therefore, the godly soul comes and to refine and to elevate the natural soul. Right? Just like the pianist, he elevates the keys and the strings and the whatever that's there, and all of a sudden you hear this amazing music. Right? You can sit and cry. That's what the whole purpose of Yisrael. Yashar Kale. Yashar Kale. Yashar means Lashon Chozek, powerful. El means to be strong. El is the word strong, means Imish Ba'el Yadi. Lavan said to Yaakov. El means power. Umemshala Chozek Umemshala. This is power and rulership. Lenatzeach, that's the godly soul. It came down to rule, to conquer in a war with the animal soul. So the idea of fighting a war, who is the war? It's in yourself. You have to fight a war against your own self and also against things that are outside of you. But the main war is within yourself, not to give in to the enemy. That's what it says. The days of our life are Shivim Shana, 70 years. But in them, the days of our life, in them are 70 years. What does it mean? In them, in the two souls. You're given 70 years, however you're given to be alive. Every day you have to make a new war. Every day is a new war to go against your natural inclinations. Don't be depressed. Don't get angry. Don't be lustful. Don't be vindictive. Don't, etc. Therefore, ein chayusam shave. Therefore, the godly soul and the animal soul are not exactly equal. Shezeh chay yoter, v'zeh pachot. The animal soul is more alive. The animal soul is very powerful. V'akol talui. Everything is according to the level of the soul, the level of the war. Shetzurich lelachem im nafsho ba'amis. You have to war against your natural soul. Lefi chelik hara, because the bad, your selfish part, kamashanim shetzurich lelachomim. You have to fight with it all the time until you transform it to good. So a person, how does it go? How did God make the world? 6 days he made the world. The last thing he created was man. And the last thing he put into man was his godly soul. He said he created man. Man was created by God's speech, Na'aseh Adam, like everything else, and a natural soul. And then it says, V'yipach bavav. The last thing he did was he blew into his nostrils this godly soul, the man. So the last thing to be created was the godly soul. The whole world was ready to be fixed up. That's the way it is with us. Every day you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you encounter is your normal soul. Then you have to pray, you have to think, you have to contemplate. Then afterwards, the last thing comes in is your godly soul. Oh, maybe God exists. Wow, this is not. And the whole idea is that you're supposed to transform the natural soul to be godly. I mean, maybe I'm going too far with this example, but I'll keep it there. Yeah, you ever beautiful music? I mean, some people appreciate music, some people don't. I like music, I really appreciate music. If you ever hear a really good pianist play classical music, beautiful, something that's really beautiful, as it really stirs you. Now, there's a big world. The world is very big. The piano is a very small part of the world. And this piano that the person is playing, a very small part of the world, right? There's a lot of people that play the piano, but not that many people can bring out the beauty that's in the music. But when somebody does succeed, that's a whole different world. It's a whole different world. All of a sudden, whoa, I didn't know there was such a thing like this in this world, this ugly, terrible, right, disappointing world. There's such beautiful music. All of a sudden, everything is harmonious and it's good. It's wonderful. Right? Where did it come from? A little bit just changes the whole business. All of a sudden, you realize, hey, maybe the world is not so bad, right? If there can come beauty like that, or something like that. And the same thing is with the world. There's the whole world, and God put the Jewish soul inside of the world and inside of the Jewish body and inside of the natural soul in order to make harmony, to make it beautiful, to transform it to good. But once it does, you see it's a whole different world. But it's a battle. It's very difficult. Right? Those people who are really, concert pianists, they had to really, really work on themselves, and they practice, 10 hours a day, who knows what. It's the same thing with us. We have to work, but here with us, not practicing 10 hours a day. You have to practice 24 hours, however long you're awake, right? Let's say you're awake, right, 16 hours of the day. So you're awake 16 hours of the day. So that in that time, 16 hours, you have to be, and the training is how do you say, on-job training. Your best teacher is experience. That's what it means. Ata Yisrael, now Jews, Ata, now you have to work. What does God want from you? Now you have to transform the bad to good. The bad and good are mixed up. That's what happened when Adam ate from the tree. He mixed it up. What do you mean he mixed up bad and good? He mixed up selfishness and godliness. You can see there's big religions in the world that they really believe that they're serving God, and the people are sincere. And really it's just a one big ego trip. They're just thinking about themselves all the time. And it's the same thing with Judaism, right? But Judaism has a little opening in it where it's possible not to think about yourself at all, to be like Abraham. That was the idea of Chassidut. Totally not to think about yourself at all. You're only thinking about what does God want. I don't care what happens to me. That's why the soul is called Yisrael, that you have to Yistareh, you have to rule and be victorious over the natural soul and to transform it from bad, from selfishness to good, to godliness. But in the future it says that in the future it says that I'm going to take away the spirit of impurity in the world. So this is going back to what we said. What does it mean that a man has two sons? He has two sons, one he from two different wives, one he hates and one he loves. Two sons. Nevertheless, the one that he hates gets a double portion. So, okay, here we see there's the two. There's the two. The one that you love, that's the godly soul. The one that you hate, so to speak, is the natural soul. Why does the natural soul get a double portion? It says, okay, let's talk about that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Nevertheless, in the future, there won't have to be this battle. There won't be a battle between bad and good at all, and you won't have to fight anymore. No called Shem Yisrael. Yisrael. I mean, to go back to the piano again, I keep there's one really great pianist that I really love to hear. I don't have to mention any names. Anyway, I really love to hear. And they asked him, how long do you practice? His wife was sitting there with him. She said, he doesn't practice at all anymore. Doesn't practice at all anymore. And he had like his repertoire was maybe 200, the most complicated, songs you can. And it was just automatic. And they asked him, how do you do it? He said, I just love every note. I just love every note of it. It's the same thing is, I'm just using this as an example. When we come to really love the Creator, so we see the good that's in the whole creation, including ourselves. And so therefore, there's no war anymore. You don't have to practice anymore. It's just beauty just comes out in everything that you do. But that's idea of Moshiach and the redemption, which we're going to talk about. He reconciles between these two powers, between the two sons, the hated son and the loved son, which we're going to talk about, God willing, tomorrow. And now let's do the Devar Malchut.